Hey everyone, this is Ross, and welcome to another episode of Fruit Talk. This is the podcast style video that I do for you guys every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern. We talk a lot about fruits and a lot about vegetables and how to grow all that stuff yourself, and also how to use it in the kitchen. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about tonight in tonight's episode. Now, normally we've been talking quite a bit about growing fruit, and we've kind of skipped over the vegetables, the annuals. We haven't updated you guys on what's been going on in the yard. For those of you guys who follow along on the YouTube channel, I know a lot of the fig videos get a lot of views, and a lot of the vegetable videos or annual videos really don't get a whole lot of attention. It's a bit of a shame because there's a lot of stuff that I'm growing besides figs. And it seems like, for whatever reason, that in the beginning of the season, there's not much else other than vegetables or annuals. And then the strawberries come in, and then once the strawberries come in, you just get a ton of fruit from that point on. And I just, most of the time, prefer fruit over vegetables. So we haven't really talked a whole lot about them in the last few months, at least on Fruit Talk. But the fall is coming. And to have a good fall or winter garden, if you think about planting for the fall, you don't actually plant in the fall. You have to plant in the summer. And that was always a big, really just a crazy misconception that I had when I first started growing vegetables, is that to have a fall garden, I didn't know you had to plant in the summer. It always seemed a bit strange to me that that's the whole concept right there, because they call it a fall garden. So wouldn't you think planting in the fall is really when to do this? But these vegetables have a really long days to maturity, and the stuff that you're going to want to grow in the fall, unfortunately, the issue with that whole thing is that they like the cooler weather, right? That's the whole idea behind having a fall or a winter garden, is that the cooler temperatures really aid in helping these plants grow and thrive. And when the warmer temperatures come in, like they are right now, it's really difficult to grow certain vegetables. All these plants and all these insects and even animals like ourselves have a particular temperature that we like to operate at. And it's the same thing with all these different plants. Depending on when where they've adapted and what portion of the season that they grow in, and their whole life cycle of how that all happens, that really depends on what types of weather they like. And I've been trying to grow different annuals that are similar to the spring vegetables, the cool loving crops as I call them, and also the fall loving crops, or the fall crops that are also cool loving crops. I've been trying to find some that you can grow all throughout the summer, and I've pretty much succeeded in that, I think. There's a number of different bok choy that I've been able to find, and also some Asian greens that are kind of like rapini or broccoli rabe. They're a lot like kailan, your Chinese broccoli. I've certainly succeeded in that. I've also found a couple of different things like Mizuna, and even Swiss chard does really well throughout the summer. In terms of your greens, it's hard to find things that can, unless you're really thinking outside the box and really experimenting with different things, it's hard to find those things throughout the summer. But what I've realized through growing a wide variety of crops now, I really have kind of got my hands in just about everything at this point. There's almost nothing that beats a couple things here. And when it comes to your spring crops and your fall crops, I think there's a few in there that are just king to me anyway. So for this planting that I did actually earlier this week, either you can start these things indoors, which is definitely recommended, or you can direct seed them, hopefully at the right time. That's what we did a couple days ago, is we direct seeded a lot of this stuff. I was really just too busy to start a lot of this stuff indoors, and who wants to really be growing things indoors at this time of the year? It's kind of a real pain. So to me, it's almost not worth it if I can't get them to just direct seed outside. However, it really is a bigger benefit to be starting these things somewhere else and then transplanting them out. What I will say, though, to go back to my other point, is that the things that have been king for me and what I decided to plant is arugula. Without a doubt, out of all the leafy greens, out of all the leafy vegetables that are kind of like salad greens, arugula is by far and away the best tasting. It is very difficult to grow because it bolts very quickly, and I've actually succeeded really well this year, heavily seeding some arugula, having it in the right spot in terms of the bed that I had planted it in is really the perfect location, because in the spring, the way that the angle of the sun works and the fact that there's no leaves on the trees, it really warms up the ground quickly in this particular location, getting the arugula off to a really nice start early in the season before the hot weather comes in. And then when the hot weather does come in, the leaves are now on the trees, and that changes the soil temperature of that bed, cooling it down. So then I'm able to grow a lot arugula for a lot longer period of time. And the same thing can kind of be said for right now, is that this particular bed that I planted a number of these vegetables in right now is quite cool. It doesn't get full sun all day. It's quite shaded. It's a cooler environment in my backyard, a cooler microclimate. So this is kind of where you kind of want to be thinking about this when you're deciding of where to plant these different things. I think it's really important. Location is so important with every individual vegetable. It's crazy. And not only are these things going to be a bit cooler now, but once things drop their leaves in the fall, is that they're actually going to be hardy enough to probably grow sometime into December. And at that point, there isn't going to be any leaves on the trees. The angle of the sun is going to change, and you're going to want that extra light. You're going to want that extra heat hitting that particular bed. So it's really a crazy difference in microclimates from when there is leaves on the trees versus when there isn't leaves on the trees. And it really is, really going to make or break my success right now. Another tip, I guess, you know what? Let's finish off what is king and what's not king. For me, at least anyway, and what I'm deciding to plant here. There's a couple things. It's hard to kind of get away with certain things at this point. So for me, I really like having carrots at this point of the season. This is kind of the last point in which you can plant carrots. If you're struggling with carrots, it's all about having the right moisture when you're germinating them. There's ways around that. It's all about having the right soil, guys. So carrots are a big one for me. I'm not a huge fan of, it seems like, turnips anymore, and I didn't really give beets a fair enough shot. I didn't really give radishes too much of a shot. I kind of gave up on the radishes at a certain point. There was other food in the yard, and it just attracted my attention more away from these things than those particular root crops. But I'm definitely a big fan of certain radishes, and I'm definitely a big fan of like the Hakurei turnips. Beets, again, like I didn't give them a fair enough shot. I don't want to just keep planting all these different things and then me not really eating them. That's kind of a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of seed. So I kind of just stuck with certain things that I really enjoy, which are things like carrots, the arugula, as we mentioned. That's actually the only leafy green that I'm growing at this portion of the year. We have Swiss chard and Mizuna that will literally just keep going until December. We also have, and what we're planting is peas, and these are the sugar snap peas that I rave about every spring. We're going to see how they work out as a fall crop. They haven't historically worked out well at all as a fall crop, and I think it has a lot to do with the location I had them in prior years, but we'll see how this all works out. I have them in the right location, the right bed. It should be much better, and we're going to see if I can get a nice little crop in before a hard frost comes in. Now, certain things can handle a bit of a hard frost and certain things can't. So it's kind of important to realize maybe I should protect this, maybe I shouldn't, and so forth. What our plans are for the fall and the wintertime, before a really big hard frost comes in, is that I'm going to be building like mini greenhouses. What are those things called? Where they're basically the wooden boxes. They're like frost shelters almost. They're wooden boxes, and over top of it is like a piece of glass or a piece of plastic to create a greenhouse environment and really keep things a bit warm and keep the frost off of those plants. And that will really extend the season for those particular things. I forget the name of it, but I have a lot of excess wood that we used to have with our raised beds. I thought I was going to give it away, but then I realized I could keep this wood and make something useful out of it. So we're going to keep that. We're going to make whatever those things are called, and we're going to extend the harvest there in the fall and the wintertime. Some other things that are a bit king here, and I think that's going to be really important though for the peas. That's why I went into that, is that having those peas is really important. Something else is that I planted this year and this couple days ago was fennel. And fennel's a big one for me that I wish I had planted in the spring. I really, really like fennel. I have some bronze fennel that I planted as an ornamental, and it looks beautiful. I have two of them in different locations in the yard. They're actually flowering and going to seed, and the flowers attract so many beneficial insects. It's crazy. They don't really attract the bumblebees, and it seems like different types of bees. They attract more like parasitic wasps and different types of wasps and really small wasps. And I've seen so many weird different species of beneficial insects on these plants that I haven't seen on pretty much anything else. So it's really cool to be able to have those particular plants for that reason. But they're also really tasty. Fennel is great in terms of using just the leaves are great. You can get the leaves and use them kind of like you would chop up chives really thinly or really fine, and then put that into some Italian cooking, and it really adds an awesome flavor to a lot of foods. I add it to like a lot of my sauces now. We're going to talk about pasta sauce in a minute here. Just various different things that I like to use it in. It's wonderful. And then also, the bronze fennel doesn't seem to bulb up. And if you get some a bulbing fennel, you can use that like an onion. And it's really good, in my opinion, in things like a nice little hot Italian sausage dish with maybe some pasta, something like penne, and you can add in some fennel and onion, or maybe not even onion, because fennel is kind of like onion. You can add in some garlic, nice big pieces of garlic with maybe some red pepper or some mushrooms, or really just have a nice little stir fry with the hot sausage, and then have in your fennel in there, and it's just incredible. The other nice thing about the flowering that the fennel does is that they go to seed, and you can collect those seeds and use those seeds for a whole host of different things. That's really nice for flavoring. It's a nice little spice in itself, because you're not going to really be able to dry the fennel leaves, but you can have the dried seed and use that in the wintertime. Also, there's a lot of different things you can use with the fennel seeds. There's a particular type of breadstick that they use in Italy, and I had it at an Italian restaurant in the city here in Philadelphia. It is an incredible breadstick. I'm really forgetting the name of this thing, but it's like a fennel breadstick here. Okay, so this may be, it's called Grissini, I think. Or Finocchio. Yeah, Finocchio. So I think that's it right here. And it's apparently it's not too difficult to make. If you're handy with dough and you know how to use these different things in the kitchen, you're a good baker. That is like so good. I cannot believe how good a fennel breadstick is. It's just incredible. So I'm going to be saving, all kinds of different things related to the fennel. The fennel is probably not going to go to seed this fall or this winter. So I'm just going to use it for the bulbs and any excess leaves that I may want to use. But next year we will plant fennel again in the spring, let that go to seed, and we'll collect the seeds again. And then also we're going to let that kind of reseed itself every year. I'm going to create a nice little fennel patch that will become perennial, and I won't have to plant fennel ever again. And I think fennel, honestly, is just like, it should be a staple in everybody's yard. I'm going to be honest. So those are like the main things I planted: arugula, fennel, carrots. We also did broccoli, and we also did some heading broccoli, not the rapini or the kailan type broccoli that you just pick off like side shoots and different things from. This is the heading broccoli, and also Brussels sprouts we did. I really am a big fan of. We're probably not going to have too many Brussels sprouts this year. This is really a thing that you need to cover. If you're going to direct seed it, you need to really cover them, because at this time of the year, we really get hit. Our brassicas really get hit when it's so warm out by whitefly. And if you have any brassicas in the yard or anything like that growing throughout the summer, they just really can become a challenge if you don't cover them with some kind of row cover, insect netting, something like that. Additionally, when it comes to Brussels sprouts and also broccoli, it's really important to kind of get them started indoors. You can kind of get away with it from seed if you have them in the right location, but again, it's quite difficult. We're going to talk about a little bit more about that and how, just some little tips and tricks. Some other crops we decided to grow is something called tatsoi, and tatsoi was one of the Asian greens that I picked up this year that was a bit impressive. I do enjoy it. It's kind of a lot like broccoli, but a lot easier to grow. And it has a really nice broccoli flavor. It doesn't taste like broccoli in terms of the texture and all that, but the flavor is very similar, right? It's got that broccoli flavor, as most brassicas do. And it's just a nice little crop, I think. So those are the main things that we planted, and that's mostly it, to be honest with you. Everything else I kind of was like, this is not too worth it, so I'm not going to really plant it. I really stuck with what I really am going to eat and really enjoy, and I planted those things in higher quantity. Because we still have, by the way, the other issue is that we still have lots of beds that are completely dedicated to our heat-loving crops. We're still growing a number of heat-loving crops that we're going to talk about, kind of how to use a lot of these crops and what I'm doing right now. I have some photos up here on the YouTube channel. We're going to show you some different things that I've been doing in the kitchen and how to use all this stuff, so that you guys can get a better understanding of what maybe to grow next year. Some other tips and tricks, though, before I move on to that, until we get to the kitchen stuff, is that I want to mention that, like I said, really seeding things now or starting them indoors is going to be key, but you need to keep the soil cooler and also moist. You need to really get out there and water, perhaps, keep things cooler, keep things wet. If you don't do this, a lot of this stuff's going to bolt, and you're not going to get the crop that you want. You're not going to get any crop at all, potentially. It's just too warm right now. Like, it's still, high 80s outside, and a lot of these vegetables I just named will not grow and will not perform well at all at those temperatures. So you need to think about the location. That's number one. Then the second tip here is to mulch. Get your seeds in the ground, let them come up, add in some mulch. Also, we need to protect these things. We need to have row cover on them because, again, we're going to have that whitefly. We're going to have lots of pests because it's so warm. These insects are very active right now. So we need to put row cover over top of them or some kind of insect netting. And that's going to make things actually a bit warmer than we want. So hopefully this is an insect netting that doesn't trap in too much of the heat. But getting that mulch down is really important. Having the right location is really important. Those are probably the biggest tips to having a successful fall garden. Getting all this stuff in the ground now is going to be key. In fact, probably in early August may have been a bit better. For certain things like my Brussels sprouts, I actually put them in the ground, direct seeded them in the ground in July. So it's nice. It's really important to pay attention to the days to maturity. Maybe even do some succession planting here, guys. Maybe if you plant them now, you get the seeds in the ground. A lot of this stuff is just too warm outside. It bolts. plant the next seeds a week or two later, and then that way you're kind of guaranteeing yourself something. This is a big learning experience, in my opinion, is really getting these crops in the early spring and in the late fall. Getting these to really work kind of separates, in my opinion, the really experienced vegetable growers or annual growers or maybe even market gardeners or just gardeners in general from just your average gardener. You know, anyone can plant a tomato plant in the ground in, let's say, May or June, and the thing's going to grow and it's going to fruit for you and everything's going to be fine. It's really these two ends of the season that really make the difference here in terms of your skill level, I think. So again, don't be discouraged by it. I know a lot of people probably have failed. I've failed many times with the fall garden. I've also failed many times with the spring garden. But so far, I would say the summer is the easiest. The spring's probably the second easiest. And then the fall, and could be debatable with everybody, but depending on where you live. But I'd say the fall is actually the hardest. So anyway, guys, that is enough for the fall garden and the winter garden. Hopefully you guys got some nice information out of all that. What's kind of been going on right now that it's been really warm, is that we've been harvesting quite a bit. We've got things like tons of tomatoes, guys, just absolutely tons. We finally have some eggplants that have been coming in. We also have peppers that are coming in, and I wish I had planted more of both of those. I also wish that I had really cleared out some of the heat-loving beds. We have different beds that are positioned in different locations in the yard, and the beds that get the most sun and the most amount of heat, I had a ton of mulch on those beds. On one bed in particular, my mistake. And because we had so much mulch, we also had some of the spring crop in there that was kind of slowing things down, that love that heat, and the soil just wasn't warming up enough. So I ended up having a pretty risky situation here with certain crops, and it wasn't looking like some of them were going to fruit for me at all or do anything for me at all. And I just came in there and said, all right, enough's enough with the spring crops. We're going to take out all this rice hulls, all this mulch that I had. We're going to put down more compost, more amendments. Really made the bed look nice. We did a lot of bed prep sometime in July, or maybe I think even sometime in like mid-June. And then we got different things in there, like corn, like a late crop of corn. Also our things like our eggplants and our peppers and our squash that kind of were sitting there doing nothing. Finally now have been coming to life and actually are fruiting for me. So it's not the end of the world, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of mistakes that could have been avoided, and I think it's really important to have certain beds for certain things and other beds for other things, and just keep it at that. So we're also getting things, you know, not just the squash, not just the eggplants and the peppers and the tomatoes. I'm hoping to get some artichokes very soon, and they haven't really flowered just yet. This is a green globe artichoke that should be perennial here in Zone 7. It's proven to be hardy. I've seen it actually at a farm about an hour from me. But it hasn't flowered yet. And I wonder if that's because it's first year. I wonder if maybe it just takes a whole lot of time. You know, this is a big iffy crop for me. We also have something called sugarcane that hasn't really done its whole thing yet. Yes, we are growing sugarcane here, and I know that's not technically, you know, I guess in the class of all these different things, but that's one thing that we've kind of been waiting on that's in the same area. We've been getting some melons that are coming in very, very soon. We're very close to our first watermelon, our first muskmelon. We're not going to get any cantaloupe, it seems like, this year, but we have tons of muskmelon, tons of watermelon. We had a big issue with our cucumbers and attracting the cucumber beetle, which then we got some cucumbers, but then they got wilt. And because they got wilt, then they spread to the melons, and then the melons didn't do well, and I had to take out a lot of the melons that were growing vertically. But we planted some melons recently, direct seeded some more melons, very early variety, to see if we could get a very late crop of melons at the end of the season. It'll be a nice little experiment to see if this is possible. I think we planted them like August 1st, somewhere around there. We planted in some direct seeded some melons, And if all holds well, we'll get some, but we should have plenty of melons. You can see them here. This is one we took a photo of actually quite some time ago. Let's see, this was taken on August 7th. So this melon here has already turned yellow, and it looks like it's probably like another 10, maybe 15 days away from being ripe. We're also had harvested a lot of our onions, and this happened in August. We're drying them right now. We're curing them. We braided them up. This is actually in my room. We're also drying a whole bunch of parsley right now. A crap ton of parsley. I don't know what I'm going to do with it because I've rarely used parsley in the kitchen. In fact, maybe someone can teach me on how to use parsley in the kitchen, because that's one of the herbs that I'm really confused on. We've also been getting soybeans here, and we've been making this into edamame. And it's very simple to make yourself edamame. It's really, really simple. What you need to do is just get yourself these soybeans, harvest them all, and you're going to boil them for about 5 minutes. Boil the water, add in some nice salt, throw these in there. They'll soften up a bit. They'll really absorb that water, and they'll also get the saltiness from the water. Then once they're done, strain them, add in some pepper, add in some salt, and you're going to be in heaven. I'm telling you, this is like the easiest thing to grow. It's the easiest thing to make. It's so simple. In terms of all the things I grow and cook, this is the easiest, because you literally plant a seed, it grows. You don't do anything, by the way. You just planted the seed, you harvest it, then you take it in and cook it for 5 minutes, and you're done. It's so easy. It's ridiculous. So the onions, by the way, we're drying them right now, but we also have quite a few onions that are just a bit smaller, and I didn't really care to dry them. We're just growing them. And they've actually been growing, or we've been using them in the kitchen quite frequently. They're looking really good. We love to use them in stir fries and to put some olive oil in there and even some garlic. And we'll cook these up with the potatoes here. These are the German butterball potatoes. These are actually the onions I was talking about that we're not curing. We're kind of just letting them sit here. They don't have to be, in the long haul for storage. We just want to use these up sooner rather than later, and then we're curing the larger ones for storage a bit later in the season. These potatoes here, we've been just obsessed with these potatoes. The German butterball potato is incredible. It turns out it really is an incredible potato. We slice it pretty thin. I'll take it. They're not the biggest potatoes, but I'll take them and I'll slice them. If the potato is more long lengthwise, I'll cut them that way. And they come out really, really good in these nice little chip size. Almost, they're thicker than chips, but they kind of come out like a chip. I mean, they're so crispy. They have such an amazing, incredible flavor that you really ought to grow some of them, guys. Here's some of the tomatoes, by the way, and this is a tomato here called, I think, Green Giant. It's quite impressive, although a lot of the fruits off of this one haven't ripened very well. Here's a nice little plate of tomatoes right here, and these are a number of varieties. I really love tomatoes this year, but there's only very few that I will eat fresh. Everything else is going specifically for sauce, because we made this sauce here, guys, that came out so well that I was completely blown away. This sauce is so good that I will not use any of my tomatoes, even the heirlooms, even the big beefsteak types. All of those will be specifically for sauce, other than pink brandywine, other than the cherry tomatoes. And I have a number of varieties that I'm growing specifically for sauce. That was our big goal this year, was to get 6 or so plants specifically for sauce, so we could have a consistent production of paste tomatoes. We have alpaca, orange banana. I think orange banana has a really nice flavor to it, but the alpaca doesn't really perform well. The orange banana performs pretty decently, actually. And we also have a heart tomato, I believe, or I don't know if it's a heart tomato. It's a paste tomato from my buddy Joe. And this tomato seems to be like a real incredible winner. So we've been adding all those in here, and I've just been using every tomato. Like I said, this isn't like, I'm only using one specific type of tomato. It really is, when it comes to this sauce, is all about the tomatoes. It's all about the tomato first. You got to grow these tomatoes, guys. First off, the right varieties that are, and you have to let them ripen for a long time, right? You want that, all that sweetness. You want them to fully ripen to get all that flavor. Additionally, you don't want to be watering your tomatoes too much, because the more water they uptake, the more watery they will be, and the less flavor they will have. Just like our figs, just like any fruit, the more water, the less intense the flavor is. It's the same thing with peppers, actually, is that if you water your peppers too much, they have a lower capsaicin. So the tomatoes here, once we get a nice product, a nice tomato, then we're going to be cutting them in half, and I try to take out all the gel, all the seeds, all those little pockets here of potential water to make the sauce less watery. And then we're going to put these through a food processor, and I don't I don't food process, oh my God, guys. I don't process them for very long, but I will just put them in there very lightly just to get them all chopped up. Once I get them all chopped up, we add them to the pan here. Prior to adding them to the pan, though, however, I will add in some garlic, and I will saute some garlic in olive oil, and I'll get the garlic nice and brown, nice and well cooked. Once that turns brown, I immediately add in the tomatoes, lower the heat. But of course, you want the tomatoes to start boiling, so it's really important to get them on a nice boil. What that's going to do is obviously break down the tomatoes. And by the way, I don't remove the skins, and some people will look down on that. We had a lot of skins on the last tomato that we did, but I think that has a lot to do with how they were cut up and they weren't in the food processor. And you know, this the first time I did it, it came out so perfectly that this is the method that I'm just going to stick with. I mean, it was so incredible. You can see there's a skin that looks like right here, but for the most part, there really wasn't many skins in this, and it didn't bother me at all. In fact, you could do that. You could blanch them for a while, get the skins off, but I think that's, in my opinion, adding water to something that already could be kind of watery in itself. You know what I mean? I don't want a sauce that's really liquidy. I want something that's really thick and meaty and really seems like a tomato. You know, I don't want a nice little, you know, like a really uniform consistency throughout the whole thing. So that's just personal preference, and I think it really comes out nice this way. And it preserves that flavor this way. I mean, you could actually, what you could do is put them in the oven and then peel the skin, and that would work out really well. You could also dry the tomatoes for a bit, let them evaporate some of that water. That also really helps intensify the flavor. But essentially what you're doing here in the boiling process is getting this whole thing broken down and getting that water to then evaporate. Over time, it looks a bit watery at first, especially when you put them in the food processor. But over time, if you wait long enough, it really will start to thicken up. You'll lose a lot of that water. I would suggest adding in a bit more olive oil. I love some nice olive oil in my sauce. I love the garlic in my sauce. We chopped up some fennel. You can see, I think this might be, here's some fennel. I'm not entirely sure, but also it could be this fresh basil that we put in here. So it's got fresh basil, fresh garlic, fresh fennel. And then we also add in, believe it or not, salt, and we have lots of red pepper. And this makes it really nice and spicy. Gets that flavor going. You could also add some Parmesan cheese. You could also do, in the beginning with your garlic, you could do some onion. Saute the onion, get the onion brown. And we also added in our own rosemary. This is definitely some rosemary right there. This is rosemary that we grew in a prior year. We dried it. We've had it in our kitchen, in our spice cabinet. And it all just... Oh, and the other thing we add in is Italian spices, which is mostly oregano. Not homegrown, because I've always struggled with growing oregano. But that's pretty much what Italian spices are, is oregano. So it really has so flavorful, this tomato sauce, that it just blew me away. And it's worth sharing. It's worth talking about. It's worth doing yourself. Here's some photos here of some onions, some homegrown eggplant, homegrown pepper. All this stuff's homegrown. Here's the German butterball potato. Really comes out fantastic, guys. Just sauteing this in the wok with some olive oil. It comes out really good. Here's our onion harvest here. What else have we been doing in the kitchen? So earlier in the season, I did a lot of pickling. We made pickles ourselves. We have a nice little pickle recipe that my great-grandfather used to make before he passed away. And it's essentially just 2 parts vinegar to 2 parts water to 1 part vinegar. And you got to find the right pickling spice. That really changes the flavor, and it really makes or breaks, I think, your pickles. Add in some fresh garlic. You can add in some red pepper if you want a spicy pickle, which is also really recommended. You can add in some dill, fresh dill if you guys have dill. I had fresh dill this time around. It just comes out really good, guys, when you make your own pickles. You got to have the right pickle. And you ought to have the right salt as well. I think I'd recommend just kosher salt, but there's also pickling salt. And if you have the right amount of salt in there, the right ratio of salt, you're going to have yourself a tasty pickle that holds up well and doesn't spoil on you. It's all about that salt and all about that vinegar and all about that pickling spice. Some of the other things that we got to make in pickling is that we do our kimchi every now and then. We do our kombucha. But we also are going to be pickling very soon our carrots, our radishes, some beets, and also our turnips. And I can even combine the whole thing into one if I wanted. But it's really nice to make a really fresh pickling of those different things. Kind of make a nice little horseradish out of it if you wanted. Get yourself some cabbage. Pickling is really awesome. Now is kind of the time for pickling. This is now the time for canning. We don't do a whole lot of canning, unfortunately. But now is also the time for making jam. And this is one thing I haven't really done too much of myself. But we have a lot of this stuff just sitting in the freezer, ready to go. And it's real simple, guys. You just take the fruits. A lot of these fruits have their own pectin in them. You don't necessarily always need pectin. And I don't really know if the pectin kind of ruins the flavor or not. But the way I've always done it is that I don't really add any pectin. And you just cook these things down just like you do the tomatoes, right? You can put them in, I guess, in the food processor if you want to kind of cook them up or cut them up a bit quicker, speed the process up a bit more. But, chop them up nice, get them nice and neat, right? If they're strawberries, take off the tops. Cut out any of the bad pieces, right? Put them in the food processor and then throw them in the pan. Let them boil there for a while. Keep stirring. Don't let the bottom burn. Same thing with the sauce. Don't let the bottoms burn here, guys. Don't do it too hot. Keep the stirring going. And eventually that water will evaporate. It'll get real nice and thick. And you'll have yourself a really awesome jam. And if you let it go too long, it turns into fruit leather. So I don't recommend you let it go too long. But you don't want to let it go take it off too soon, because then it's a bit too watery, a bit too liquidy of a jam. You can really just dump it like a syrup. You don't want that unless you do want that. But for the most part, that's pretty much how I'm doing all of them. We're going to be doing currants like this. We're going to be doing black and red currants, by the way. We have like 4 big freezer bags of strawberries. We have some blueberries. And I think we may do some raspberries at the end of the season, because we're just going to have way too many raspberries. I mean, we always just have too many to really know what to do with. But I think that's all we really have frozen for now. I could inevitably make some fig jam as well. If I get some figs like this that really are not ripening to perfection, why eat them fresh, But if I get enough of them at once, that kind of makes it worth it. Maybe if we get a nice little rainstorm that comes in, I just get a bunch of figs that really don't look too hot. Instead of tossing them, I'll put them in the freezer and we can make some jam out of them a bit later. I think that's probably a really good idea. So I think that, yeah, I think that's what I'll do from now on. It just rained today, so I'm sure I'm going to come out tomorrow and there's going to be a ton of rain, or there's going to be a ton of split and spoiled figs that I'm probably just not going to want to eat. So yeah. Oh, the other things we've been doing is making pies, and we made ourselves a blueberry pie. We made ourselves a peach pie. We've just had so many peaches that we didn't really know what to do with them. I mean, I'm telling you, I got 300 peaches at least. Here's some that we've been eating fresh. Man, when I'm telling you that I could eat like 5-6 peaches in a day, that's not really an exaggeration. Where's our peach photo here that we had of our incredible harvest? Here it is right here. So believe it or not, I had baskets like this. I probably had about 10 baskets just like this. Maybe even 12. But it's just crazy, guys. And I gave away a lot. I really did. And all the friends and all the family that we gave them to really enjoyed these things. But at a certain point, you just gotta do something with it, right? So people preserve these things. You can also make them into a cobbler, a pie. You can also probably make some sort of preserves out of this. But yeah, I think it turned out really nice. I've just been really overwhelmed by the amount of peaches. Our plan was to get a ton of persimmons, but our persimmon tree dropped a lot of the crop this year. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a bit for a big persimmon harvest, but I would have dried all of them. I would have really focused on drying them. I did try and dry a lot of the peaches, but they didn't dry completely. And I had to go, and then I came back, and a lot of them were molded, spoiled. It was just a complete mess. But yeah, if you can dry them completely, it really helps out your cause here, guys. And the storage life of those peaches would have been much, much longer than what they were. We've also been getting grapes quite recently, and I've been thinking about drying those, some of them into raisins. We talked about that in a video we did recently. Here's a pickling recipe, by the way, for dill pickles, for anyone interested. This is some pickling salt. It's quite... I really do prefer, though, the kosher salt. What else have we been kind of getting from the garden here before I let you guys go? We've been getting a lot of Asian-style greens, that's for sure. And a lot of them I've kind of sifted through and realized that's just not something I want to grow again. Something that I've been kind of really looking forward to, and I'm wondering if it's going to do anything, is the horizontal. And I forget the... Let's see. This is a type of... it's related to quinoa, I believe, and it's really popular in Mexico. And I tasted it and realized, oh my god, I've actually had this before. And it produces these like kind of these stems of flowers like this, but mine really don't look as thick as this. You know, these look a bit thicker, and I wonder if maybe they're not going to get any thicker, and that's just kind of what I have to deal with. Nah, these look really thick compared to mine. So I'm very confused about if my plant is going to continue, or maybe I should start harvesting now. But I mean, look at this. It's got such culinary use to it. And I've been excited to try it and use it, but I haven't. I've just been kind of waiting to see. So yeah, that's one that I've been looking forward to, is the horizontal. Let's see what else. The carrots are there. And then we've got some Asian green there, Asian greens, the rapini, the broccoli rabe. We finally figured out the broccoli rabe this year, I think, pretty well. And there's definitely some broccoli rabe that I'm going to be growing next year, and others I'm not. Some of them cook a lot better and just taste a lot better. A lot of these Asian crops didn't seem to really work out too well. I really love the soybeans. The onions came out well. We still have a whole host of tomatoes that we actually haven't tried yet. And the corn. I'm really hoping the corn comes through. We'll see how that one works out, but that one's going to be more for fresh eating. We're not going to process that in any way. What I would like to do very soon is actually get myself with my peaches and start grilling them. People have recommended this, is that put your peaches on the grill for a bit, maybe add in some brown sugar, and they come out really good. Yeah, so if anyone else has any recommendations on what we can do in the kitchen here with a lot of these different crops, let me know down in the comments. Also, if you guys enjoyed this episode of Fruit Talk, consider supporting us on Patreon. Definitely would really appreciate it. And also, guys, check out our website, figboss.com. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Raddi. And we will see you all soon. All right? See you for next week's episode.